All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Morgan. I run our marketing team here at Blueboard, and we're so excited to have such a big group on with us today. Feel free to keep the chat flooding in. Thanks so much for everyone who's participating. Let us know where you're dialing in from, what you want to hear today from our panelists. So let's jump in. We're going to start off with some intros. We'll go from left to right. I'll let Jeff say hello and introduce himself. Everyone will share what their company is like, where they work, and what they're hoping to share with you today.
Great, thanks Morgan. Hi everyone, welcome from all over the world. I love seeing NC on there. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina right now. I work at 15Five. We make continuous performance management software. It helps people interact with their managers and with each other, share recognition, do less than obsess, focus on goals, and so on. I'm a cognitive psychologist and the director of our Best Self Academy. Today I'll be talking about motivation. I saw one of the questions in the chat already. It's about, keeping that motivation and inspiration going, how to do it. So we'll talk about that a little bit today.
And welcome, Saloni.
Thanks, Morgan. Hi, everyone. I'm glad everyone's able to join. I'm calling in from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I run the people operations team at Sentry. We provide error monitoring software that helps all of your software teams discover, triage, and prioritize errors in real time, just helping millions of developers ship better software with our product. So I'm really passionate about these topics because I do see folks trying really hard to stay motivated and productive in this very not normal environment. And I think, I just want to stress like how people need to be kind to themselves and acknowledge that you might not always find you're going to be productive and motivated. And so having resources that help you navigate those moments are kind of key to finding ways to getting yourself back on track.
Wonderful, thank you. And next up, Miss Ella, welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Miss Ella. I am a leadership trainer and a coach. I work for a company called Life Labs Learning. If you aren't familiar with us, our bread and butter is manager and skill training. So we like to combine science and, of course, some fun to help people better understand how to behaviorize the skills that matter most. Our goal is really to simplify complexity. And right now, it's really all about how to do the most that we can in a way that feels brain friendly. We've been working remote and dispersed for probably about 4 or 5 years now. So a lot of what we practice and offer in our workshops are things that really, really matter and make a difference right now. And we've been creating a bunch of amazing tools that we're so excited to share with all of you through workshops and through this conversation.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And again, I'm Morgan. I run our marketing team here at Blueboard, and we're super excited about this topic. I'm also now being remote for over a month now and have also had distributed teams prior to that. But we know now more than ever that recognition is such an important tool for building engagement. A lot of your team is working above and beyond, behind the scenes, and they might not be as seen as normal. So it's really important to take that extra step to recognize your team, especially when everyone's working a little bit harder or in a little bit more new times than usual. So we'll jump into our agenda, but thank you again to all of our panelists for joining today. And actually first we'll do a quick sponsor overview. I'm going to take a moment to also run a quick poll as you learn about our sponsors and you'd like to learn a little bit more, connect with their teams, see a demo afterwards, feel free to respond to the poll that's on screen right now. So first, a little bit about Blueboard, for those of you who aren't as familiar. We're a recognition and rewards platform that's all about meaningful, authentic experiences that help connect employees, help them challenge their comfort zones, learn something new, and more ultimately build more meaningful relationships with themselves and the community around them. So at this time, we're offering really amazing in-home experiences that might be the art of brush calligraphy. It might be building a DIY greenhouse in your backyard or getting onto a Peloton bike for the first time. But when we're ready to get out in the world, we also offer hundreds of hand-created experiences, from doing kayaking trips to learning to ride horseback to hiking Machu Picchu. And we're often plugging in for things like anniversary programs, employee referral incentives, sales and presidents clubs, and also more importantly to the topic of this webinar, spot recognition, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. So feel free to drop a note if you'd like to learn more about Blueboard after the event. Otherwise, I will pass it over to Jeff for a little bit of an overview on 15Five. Jeff, I think you're on mute.
On
There you
mute.
go.
Hey, thanks, Morgan. So thanks everyone for joining. Really excited to talk about 15.5. We are a leading provider of people management software. We're interested in employee growth as well as helping people be and become their best selves. We serve 2,200 or so global customers. And right now, we'd love if you were interested in learning more about 15.5, of course. We have a special right now where until June 15th, 15.5 software is free for departments and teams of up to 50 people. So if you indicate interest in 15.5, we'd love to reach out and help you with OKRs, reviews, recognition, better one-on-ones, helping your people stay connected whenever they're working remotely. So we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thanks so much, Jeff. We'll go ahead and close out the poll and look forward to connecting with you after the event for all those who raised a hand. All right, so our agenda today, we just went through welcome and intros, and now we're gonna move into our next section, why motivation matters now more than ever before. So effectively, why are we here today? Why is this such an important topic and worth an hour of your morning or afternoons? From there, we'll go through more of a show and tell section, discussing tools, strategies, fresh ideas for building motivation and productivity across teams. And then we'll wrap up with really that notion of measuring what matters. How do you look at different aspects of how work is done during this time? And then as a business leader, how do you really project those productivity expectations all the way through your business planning? A quick note again on housekeeping, our lines will be muted. We welcome you to ask questions either through the Q&A tool or through chat. Chat might be the fastest way to get in touch with our team, and we're hoping to be able to answer some of those questions on the fly as we go through. Just a quick note, as you see on screen, the best way to share your ideas with the group is to toggle in the chat function to choose all panelists and attendees. That will help spread your voice, and especially if you're sharing new ideas, we'd love for you to share those more broadly with the group. We will be recording today's session. We'll be writing up a recap and sharing that recording next week on the Blueboard blog, and everyone will receive a copy. So if you do have to jump early, we'll be getting that emailed out next week. And then for those of you looking for your professional development credit from SHRM, we will be featuring that at the end. So stay tuned, we'll be covering that as we wrap up. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Jeff, who's going to take us through why motivation matters now more than ever before.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. Definitely already seeing questions in the chat too about, staying motivated during these challenging times and the importance of balancing accountability with focusing on mental health and self-care. And motivation matters more than now for many, many reasons. I'm going to talk a little bit about a mix of extrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivation, recognition, and the progress principle. And then also there's a link to an article there about best self-management, where you can take a look at why we think focusing on people during this time will help you unlock performance as well. So starting with extrinsic motivation, right now, given the challenging times, people are so concerned about job security and compensation. So definitely want to make sure that we're taking care of those fundamental needs around not only physical safety and psychological safety, but also financial well-being. Very, very important in these moments. Also, people are interested in knowing about raises, rewards, bonuses. So definitely want to take care of people's extrinsic motivational needs around job security, compensation, rewards, and bonuses. However, we also want to focus on intrinsic motivation as well. So for those of you who've read the book, Drive by Dan Pink, this will sound familiar. This idea of autonomy, so giving people freedom and flexibility. Many people, as they've moved to remote work, have more freedom and flexibility in their job than they've ever had. And it's important to balance that autonomy with accountability as well. Mastery, so continuing to invest in your people, continuing to invest in recognition of progress, but also learning and growing opportunities. And competence, this idea of giving people a way for to know that they're demonstrating expertise in their particular area. Purpose, so aligning against this purpose of serving other people. A great way to help with purpose is exposing your people to the people they serve. So even if the individual works internally, they don't serve your customer directly, showing your people, say in finance or IT, how their work helps other people in the organization is a great way to align with their purpose and meaning. And also belonging and community. So making sure your people stay connected and feel connected. There's great ways to do that now, of course, with Zoom and Slack and other things like 15.5 as well. But just ensuring that your people feel that shared sense of community and that shared purpose, belonging with others. Recognition is a great way to keep people motivated. And one way to do that is recognizing progress. So Teresa Amabile's work around the progress principle is this idea of being seen and valued at work regularly. So within 15.5 software, we have this practice baked in, but it's this idea of seeing people and acknowledging the contributions that they're making on their most important projects on a weekly basis, right? So making sure people feel seen and heard that regularly.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, so much for that intro. And we're going to jump into actually a few questions that we've heard from you during the sign up process. We've spotlighted about 7 questions that came through during registration. Thanks again for all of those who were submitting through. This first one is a little bit about channeling empathy. This one comes from Nicole. She asked how to balance a stressed employee and productive results. This is, of course, kind of a challenging question because we want to be leading with empathy, but also making sure that we're getting our jobs done at the end of the day. So Saloni, would love to pass it over to you for your perspective here.
Oh, thanks, Morgan. Yeah, this one can be really hard because if you have a stressed employee, full productivity might be one of the last things that someone's able to achieve or think about, especially if they don't have the right kind of guidance or support to help them navigate this. And knowing that people have different groups of people at home to care for, you know, if you're in the same space continuously or you're simply trying to juggle all these different needs. So what we've been doing is focusing on, you know, both the individual and team check-ins and just asking basic questions to gauge someone's emotional temperature. Things like, you know, how are you feeling? What's been on your mind? Are you sleeping okay? What kinds of things are you doing to stay socially connected? And how are you looking after yourself? And so by doing this, you know, you're like through video chats as well, you're getting probably about 80% through body language and facial expressions that really speak volumes. And we're flagging folks that might not be doing as great and tag teaming with other leaders or managers in the company so that we can work hands-on to, you know, provide a nurturing and supportive environment. And I think just communicating regularly and making sure the cadence of your communication is what your employees need, and encouraging them to have self-awareness of what they need on any given day. And to your point, exercising that self-care on a daily basis is really key to, you know, getting back to a place of motivation, productivity, and just encouraging a balance between developing a routine, but also adding some fun, spontaneity into their daily lives as well.
Yeah, I'm going to add. Go ahead,
sorry.
No, I was going to add to what Saloni is saying. I think that one thing that we're seeing a bunch is that everyone is jumping into this new world of work. And I was actually watching a video that Esther Perel had put up. If you're not familiar with her, she is a researcher and a clinician. She mainly focuses on relationships, but we've been saying like, we're all working from home, but the reality is we're working with home, like we're working with our distractions. We're working with the fact that we're also making lunch or dinner in different ways than we had previously. And so there's gotta be some communication around how things have changed and making sure we're creating some certainty where there is uncertainty. So maybe we don't have the answers, but it's simply being able to say, I know this isn't normal, or I know this doesn't feel right. And I know that maybe productivity won't look the same. And also creating a space for people to be able to tell us. We've got to be really clear with them, I think now more than ever, but always, we can't read your mind. So if there's something that doesn't feel right, please let us know so that we can adjust and talk about it. Let us know what you're facing. But create a shared reality and create shared vocabulary that makes it easy for everybody to kind of be on the same page.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we'll talk later about just like how the norms have changed and all of that. And we had joked yesterday during our dry run that if anyone's kids run into the room, like please scoop them up, please welcome them into the panel. So we'll be working with our home as it goes today, but so far so good. All right, next question came from Crystal. This is a delicate question too. How do you keep people accountable without moving into what would be micromanaging, which a lot of us as people leaders want to avoid? Jeff, I want to kick it over to you for this first one.
Yeah, great question. And I love the idea of working with home. I think that makes a lot of sense. I do hope we see somehow some kids and pets in the videos. But the idea of keeping people accountable and visible without micromanaging is really important, especially if you are used to just managing by walking around. You're a player coach on a team where you're just around these people all the time. There's this great concept from the book Great at Work called doing less than obsessing, and it's related to OKRs and this idea of measuring what matters. And it's important in these times to re-agree around what's expected based on the changing context to ensure that, okay, we're actually spending our time moving things forward in a way that aligns with what's possible right now and what's appropriate for our business. And then also being careful about uh, not moving from, jokingly, someone called this yesterday macro management, this idea of like you're moving too far away from the person, but versus micromanagement. So definitely a fan of like weekly check-ins, using methods or borrowing methods from Agile and Scrum methodologies with daily stand-ups, retrospectives, debriefs every couple weeks, ensuring that people are visible at the team level, at the department level. Also, that you're reminding people of the importance of their work. Like right now, we've really, in a great way, many organizations have swung towards caring about people, but we also need to be caring about performance in a way that honors the context and thinking about people in their shoes and what's going on. So again, I guess I would say it's like keep the focus on doing less than obsessing with an OKR framework or goal, re-agree around what's most important, and then come up with a cadence where we're checking in with people, but we're allowing them time to do deep work as well.
I love that. And just to comment on how we're handling it at Blueboard, a lot of our teams have also adopted daily stand-ups when they weren't there before. I'm doing that with my team now. We're distributed across 2 offices, but it's been an awesome way just for us to like welcome and say hi to each other every morning. Do a really quick, even for 15 minutes, like what are the 2 things I want to do today, and give the time and space to have those conversations where we need support in order to move forward with that day, and then get to celebrate the accomplishment of getting those 2 or 3 things done amongst everything else you're balancing at home when we check in the next day with each other. But yeah, personally, that's been a great add for me, Jeff. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, and just to build on what you said, thanks, Morgan, is there's this counterintuitive thing too, where in these times, if you focus just on people and not on the output of their work, it can actually suggest that their work doesn't matter. And like we really want to avoid going that far. Like we need people's contributions at work. Their work does matter. It can't just be like, oh, during these tough times, like we don't need what you do at work, but we need to care about what you do at work with tremendous focus and care on the context and the person as well. So it needs to be both. And then recognizing progress is actually a great way to nurture that person's need for accomplishment and meaning. Whereas if you just ignore performance, then it's like, it's easy to slip into like, why am I bothering doing this work in these trying times? Like no one's even talking about the work. So we do want to make sure that we're finding that balance between people and performance.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes back to that notion of our inherent need to be seen and valued. Like you said, making sure the work is worth it. And also, how am I making a contribution to the company? And I would say a lot of employees, especially for companies that might be struggling right now due to their business, want to really rise up and have that impact. So how are we feeding them opportunities to work on side projects, to help maybe connect to leadership in a new way, and to step up into a new role? That's another thing that we'll talk about, I think, later as we look at reallocating resources. But yeah, seeing and valuing is very critical right now.
One additional thing that I just want to add in here quickly, because I saw somebody bring it up in the chat, I think Peter, Peter mentioned that there are quite a few poor managers who've probably gotten away with micromanaging or maybe even being completely hands off. And right now, what I would really encourage everybody here to, as hard as it is, and I don't want to add any more science to your lives than you need, but see what's happening right now as a petri dish of whether your work at work, when you're physically there or not physically there, is actually effective. And this is the canary in the coal mine. You'll hear me say that again later on. We have to understand whether our processes actually work. If you're seeing that things are breaking down now, there's a good chance they weren't that effective when we were in the office a month or 2 months ago. And our micromanagers, again, our managers who are totally hands off, or relationships that just don't seem to be well in terms of communication or collaboration, it's because they weren't working really well. Everything that's happening now is often an exacerbation of those things. So we want to be really clear and not just blame it on COVID, and consider what can we do differently, if it's maybe giving feedback, or if it's simply just being able to speak up and say, this hasn't worked in a long time, should we try something differently? Now is actually a really beautiful time to start new habits, because we actually have this space to do so.
I love that. Thank you, Miss Ella. And I just wanted to do a quick reminder on chat. We're getting so many amazing questions through. Reminder to toggle to all panelists and attendees, just to help spread the love, and that way we can answer back to the group too. Thank you all for all the questions so far. And then rounding out this section, one question that came through anonymously, it's really about managing expectations. And we loved this question because it was definitely vulnerable and something that I'm sure a lot of us are facing as people leaders or team leaders. They're asking, how can I help my team with anxiety about job security and performance when I'm not even sure myself about the health of the company? So I wanted to pass this one over to Miss Ella to kick us off.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to managing expectations, and I'm seeing some other people bringing this into the chat as well, here's the thing. I don't know that your teams necessarily need the best and clearest answer right now, because we are all in a time of uncertainty. You also don't know what job security necessarily looks like. You also don't know if you're going to have that summer vacation that you have planned. Like, we don't know. But what I have seen that's been really helpful, and I'll even speak to what we've done at Life Labs, is just having regularly cadenced emails. So for example, we have an email that goes out every Friday. It comes from our leadership team. It's called Us Versus the Virus. And it's cheeky and maybe a little silly, but what I can count on is every Friday I get an update. Here's what we know, here's what we don't know. But I want you to know that we have your back. If you need to talk to somebody about it, you can reach out. If you're questioning how this impacts your work, here are the resources, here are the tools. So again, I would just step away from having to know everything, and just be sure that people know that you have their back and that you'll be reaching out as soon as there's information that is available. At the end of the day, one thing that I think is important to normalize here is that anxiety is normal and natural. Whatever somebody's feeling can be completely valid, and it doesn't have to be about trying to convince them that they shouldn't feel otherwise. It's simply saying, here's what we do have available. What can I do that would help make you even feel 10% better with the information that we do have?
Absolutely, and really encouraging leadership to continue transparency themselves, to share as much as makes sense, to again kind of maintain a sense of optimism, but also be real. I think people appreciate that now, especially as we're distant. One thing that our founders do that I think is really awesome is they'll host a bi-weekly like culture block for 30 minutes. So if someone is wanting to talk with them directly, it brings them closer to our growing team of about now 85 people. And it gives them more intimacy and space to talk one-to-one instead of feeling like they have to broadcast it publicly through Slack, or not feeling like they have that proximity to our leadership for those more personal questions. All right, thank you everyone. And thank you again for those who submitted questions through the registration form. We're gonna move into our next session, which is really the show and tell, the fresh ideas that we can hopefully share to you that you can emulate and bring back to your company. So we're going to kick off with Saloni. She's going to walk through a few programs that they've introduced at Sentry.
Yeah, thank you. So this kind of piggybacks off of what that question was speaking to. We rolled out a wellness stipend back in January for our employees, and I think people typically tend to associate wellness and health with physical well-being. And so in our communications, we have very specifically highlighted to consider using this stipend for psychological and emotional well-being, you know, even now more so than ever. We created a wellness guide with a ton of different resources and various ideas on how to use the stipend in different ways. And we've included like a meditation and mindfulness resources section, ways to, you know, I can see some folks asking questions about having kids at home. We included resources that we've kind of sourced from our various people ops, external resources, ways to keep your kids or your inner child busy and engaged, ideas for staying social while you're staying home, physical wellness while you're staying home as well, and self-care and emotional well-being tools. And so initially when we moved to remote work, which was about a week before the Bay Area mandate, we weren't sure how long this would be given the shelter in place removal date keeps moving for everyone. So we held off giving out a stipend for the remote tools, but it became clear a few weeks ago that this timeline might be longer. And so we've rolled out a stipend for people to be able to set up their home spaces properly, and equip themselves with the equipment that they do need to stay productive and motivated, and comfortable as well. And, you know, again, we're focusing on lots of communication, doing these soft check-ins via Slack with one another, via Hangouts, and team check-ins. Yeah, and so we did want to get real life on how people are doing, and so we do use our survey tool. We did a pulse survey so that we can continue to tailor our processes and systems to meet people's needs, and of course, like, address any blind spots as a leadership team that we might not have thought of yet, or are simply just not aware of through our other means of interactions. And we've been, you know, kind of piggybacking off of that. Like, communication is so crucial right now. We send out communication centered around the understanding that, like, this is a truly disruptive and strange time for folks, and our concern is really making sure that people are staying not just physically healthy but mentally and emotionally healthy too, and highlighting that if people do need time off to handle things in their personal life or readjust your schedules, we want folks to be able to do that. And we're, you know, we've highlighted in our communications as well that we're not expecting everyone to stay fully productive all of the time. We know that this is going to be an emotional journey on any given day or week. And I think one of the things that we've been sharing is like the mental mindset. And I have a quote that a teammate shared with me, which I think really highlights this. And he said, I only wear my sweatpants and t-shirts and always felt lazy weekend. And so I read that dressing up fancy as if you would go to work makes you feel better. And I can confirm it actually does. And so this is kind of speaking to the mental mindset where you set yourself up for your day. And for some people, it might be putting on clothes that make you feel good about yourself and create separation from your casual weekend vibe and clothes. Having spaces that are designated as work areas versus the other areas of your home or space that are your relaxation areas. And I think that this creates very hard boundaries to say, at the end of the workday, leaving my work when I'm done, and then move into your personal space, to be able to give yourself that separation and permission is very powerful. We also had another employee get really creative in learning new ways to communicate in this remote setting. This came from an employee who was already a remote employee, and he shared with the rest of the team about how he's gotten creative in making these virtual signs to help him assist in collaborating faster when you're in large group hangouts, and kind of using these visual cues as well to communicate across.
A really quick question, Saloni, if you don't mind. A few people have asked the types of questions that you're asking on the pulse surveys. I'm wondering if there's maybe one or two questions in particular that you approximately might be able to regurgitate that have just been really helpful and really pointing to the data that matters the most.
Yeah,
anything
absolutely.
that you're looking at closely?
I mean, I think we're asking questions like, do you have the space that you need to be able to feel productive? Do you feel safe in your space? That's a key one, especially in this time period. We want to be able to make sure we can work with employees and make sure that they feel like they've got the safety in their home environments as well. Are we as a leadership team doing enough for you? Do you feel connected to your team and your managers? Do you feel like your managers directly contributing to helping you stay productive, motivated? Yeah, those are like, there were maybe 15 questions I think that we asked in total.
Mm-hmm. And have you been asking, or do you plan to run the survey more than once, or was it just kind of a one-time check-in? Curious, like the frequency that you might want to run that to see if there's anything that's changed over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we will likely run it again. I think because it's so uncertain as to how long this is going on, we're trying to adapt and evolve as the weeks go by and things change. So if it does appear that we're going to be in this extended shelter in place, we will continue to run it to make sure that we're not missing any breakdowns of communication or, you know, just staying on top of the needs of employees. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving forward, we had a quick question. This one's just really a great layup from Heather. She's asking, you know, what are some creative ways to foster culture with a mostly remote workforce? Jumping right back in again to Saloni, she'll speak to a few ways that people are building culture while we're dispersed at home.
Yeah, I love this question. I think we've seen so many fantastic ways come out of our teams. There are a lot of creative ways you can stay connected to your teammates. We've hosted virtual team lunches with people in their kitchens, like cooking and sharing what they're eating, happy hours, gaming hours where folks can disconnect from the typical work meeting and they'll jump into an online game. Just last night, I actually saw someone post in our Slack channel that they were doing a virtual puzzle, and people were jumping in and helping them do this virtual puzzle, which is really cool. Yeah, themes and stories for meetings as well. Our office manager suggested for our regular people ops meeting that people wear a favorite hat. And this was a really great way to start off the meeting by sharing a backstory about why that's your favorite hat as well. And then I've got a little picture here of a show and tell. Our customer operations team came up with the idea of doing a show and tell and sharing with their team something meaningful to them. And so we've got, you know, one coworker shared a jar of sand that she brought with her from Santa Barbara when she relocated for her role at Sentry. And, you know, another coworker shared his love of SpongeBob and shared his collectibles. And then another teammate was focusing on her wellness, and she shared how she uses fresh pickled turmeric from India to like help give her immune system a boost. And you know, another coworker shared like her puzzle and musical theater enthusiast, and you know, a puzzle that like depicts this. So I think there are a lot of ways that you can get creative about staying connected in these interesting ways, and sharing them with your teammates as well. You know, put it somewhere where everybody has access to it. You know, start putting a list together so that you're not just doing this with your team, but you're allowing other folks to see what you're doing and give them access to these ideas as well.
I love that. I love the hat theme. I'm gonna have to steal that for a future meeting too. All right, and then passing it over to Marcella, tell us about Speed Connection.
Yeah, so Speed Connection is a really amazing exercise. At the very beginning of all of this, we were supposed to be having a team retreat, and it's when our entire org comes together. We're all going to be in California for a few days, and everyone was really looking forward to it. And I have to be honest, I was a little disappointed that it was going to be fully on Zoom, and I'm like, it's not going to be the same. But this was an activity that completely changed my mind, and I think it'll be something that you all can benefit from. Somebody mentioned it earlier. I want to say it was Lindsay in the chat, was thinking about how do you create some sense of autonomy for people so it doesn't feel like it's only about jumping onto a Zoom happy hour. We're all on Zoom. Your mom's probably on Zoom. It's exhausting. How many birthday parties and weddings and all the things can you do on Zoom? It's nice, but it can be tiring. I know for one, I'm somebody who just needs a little bit of space. So the thing is really diversifying channels when it comes to how we're actually connecting. It's great to have a happy hour, but don't make it feel like it needs, or that it has to be that everybody is there. This Speed Connection works in this way. So you'd randomly pair people in your org. If you already use tools like Donut, that's amazing. It already works very well. But you want to create some boundaries and support so that we can reduce some of the cognitive load for people. We set it up so that it was for the duration of our retreat, which was 3 days long. But maybe for you, this is doing it for a week long. So these two people get paired, and then it's up to them to decide when they want to connect and how they want to connect. So if they do want to use Zoom, awesome. If they don't want to, they don't have to. If they prefer to say, hey, we're going to check in with each other via text during the week from time to time, or we'll call each other when we happen to go for a walk, or use Slack, totally up to them. But again, that autonomy really helps without feeling like I'm being forced to connect. Then we also like to add some prompts to make it easy for people to dive into the conversations. One piece of advice is to just make sure that you're not afraid of going deep here. You know, the questions like, what's your favorite color, or did you see Tiger King, are fine, but I think we're all kind of past that at this point. I think it's important for people to just feel a little bit more vulnerable with one another. And I think that'll create space for maybe some of the conversations that haven't happened with you just yet. So you see some examples here on the slide, but some that I really love here is like, tell me about your best friend, or tell me about something that you want to get off your chest today. But we give them the space to do this when they want to, and they're doing it with one person, which can lower that guard of feeling like they need to be on, especially when they're glued to a screen for the majority of the day.
All right. Let's see. So the next step, besides making those meaningful connections, virtual happy hours, as we talked about at the beginning, it's also just a really important time to appreciate each other's great work. There's so many working behind the scenes, like I said earlier, stepping up into new roles, going above and beyond, supporting their team, or maybe even just helping to build a more positive culture for your company right now. It's really important to have those moments of celebration. So a few ways that you can do that. What do we mean when we talk about spot recognition exactly? Starting even with those daily ways of appreciation. We talked about our lift up tool earlier. I'll repost that link in case you want to send a note. Just encouraging the whole company to show appreciation, whether that's calling someone out of the blue, sending them a note on Slack or Teams or your communication tool of choice, or sending them something special, maybe with like the recognition note, or sending them a favorite treat in the mail, for example, is a great way just to show that those daily behaviors and actions have not gone unnoticed and that their work is really valuable, especially at this time. As we kind of go into more special occasions, there's opportunities for managers to nominate and reward teams as well. We actually have a really great practice of that at Blueboard. That might be the ability to have a discretionary budget that managers can dole out as they see people going above and beyond, especially within their immediate team. Maybe they just totally crushed a sales meeting. Maybe they did raise their hand to volunteer for an extracurricular project and did a really amazing job leading that. Maybe they improved your tools or processes. Those behaviors are great, and we encourage you to have opportunities for managers to give rewards out for those occasions. And then moving up the chain for those really above and beyond moments, encouraging either quarterly or monthly rewards. At Blueboard, we adopt quarterly rewards, and they're really fun because they're either linked to different departments or either people who are displaying our core company values or really living out our mission. We had a Q2 kickoff on Tuesday, and we were actually able to go through our rewards ceremony there. So I'm highlighting actually Patrick, who is an amazing teammate. He's on our concierge team and had gone above and beyond to really improve our lines of communication as we shifted into COVID. And of course, people were curious, you know, what do I do with this experience? Am I able to get out and about? Can I reschedule this for when we're able to be back in the world? And he was amazing to rise to the occasion, re-script our messaging, and really lean into communication that was high empathy and really understanding and supportive of our employees who had received rewards. So that was a really special occasion and way to celebrate him. And of course, we give out Blueboard rewards as well. So as you go through this time, you know, my question for you is, you know, what are those behaviors that really signal above and beyond performance? Or what are those behaviors that you really want to put on a pedestal so that others can emulate them and really rally behind them? And then how do you think about programs that are really easy to socialize so that employees can see the great work of others and really feel comfortable celebrating and encouraging them along the way? So I'll stop there, and then we'll move into our final section. We're going to talk through really what do we measure during this time, what matters, what has changed, what does that definition of work look like today versus yesterday. So I'm going to have Marcella kick us off here. Take it away.
Thank you. So in the new normal, and also thinking about whatever the new normal is when that comes and we're settling back into life in our offices or maybe a little bit more dispersed, it's so important to really make the implicit explicit. And that means that we've really got to put some, again, shared vocabulary and words around what is happening. When it comes to productivity and checking in with your people and potentially micromanaging, we really want to avoid that. And I think one of the best ways is to redefine this very, very antiquated view of work, which was antiquated pre-COVID and is surely antiquated now. Work productivity is not about how present you are in the office. And I think we have gotten stuck there for so many years, probably forever roughly, where it's like, I'm in here and I'm on Slack or I'm available on my computer for 8 hours of the day, and that means that I'm doing something. This should be about goals. This should be about impact. And so this needs to be a shared conversation, meaning that it's not just the manager saying, here are the most important things, but also getting our teams and our direct reports in a habit of asking, hey, is this the most important thing? Or why does this thing matter? Impact is going to be our way of actually measuring success. If you can have a mile marker for what gets done, it'll make it a lot easier for people to actually feel like they're contributing. The other thing that's going to be very helpful here is just keeping people open to the fact that everything's going to be changing all the time. And it will be, just normally and naturally, as is the world. But hey, this might not be perfect. And the minute we know what's going on, we'll make sure that everybody is up to speed. We'll make sure that it's a collaborative change as opposed to us just putting a change on you. But being open to it will keep people in, I think, a space of being willing to embrace change whenever it happens. The next thing comes down to creating norms for communication and for conflict. As I mentioned earlier, any issue that we had as an org is now going to be exacerbated. So if you didn't have a good feedback norm previously, now is the time to really address that. And it's not about being negative, but conflict does happen. And the goal is to say, if conflict does happen, here's our first step. Here's the thing that we're going to do. Maybe it's even just addressing the channels in which conflict is going to be talked about. So if something goes down that isn't right, I'm not just going to send you or bombard you with Slack messages. Instead, I'm going to send you an email and list out specifically what I'm concerned about. It's also an opportunity for you to determine when feedback should be given, and often making sure if there's a regular cadence for the feedback that you do give. Last but not least, I really want to speak to this aspect of distractions and normalizing everything that's around us. We were talking about this earlier, but normalizing the fact that you're going to see somebody's partner or kids or roommates or whatever. We've just got to take away the anxiety and stress that comes with people trying to do work perfectly because they are seeing it again as like working from home. But instead, I'm trying to work through something and this is just how it is. You might hear, a kid cry. Oh, well, it's not the end of the world. We'll work through it. We have bigger problems. But normalizing what work looks like and making sure that everything that you're feeling, especially from a leadership team perspective or a people team perspective, is actually explicit. Otherwise, you are creating uncertainty where there doesn't have to be. Make it safe for people to feel okay.
Yeah, and I kind of actually want to jump in there as well, Masala, because I have 2 little humans and dogs and partners, and so my house is usually fairly bustling. And I think that them jumping into a chat while I'm talking to people or having a meeting creates a human connection as well, and really makes people feel like they are developing this personal connection to you. I think that's like very important as we go through these changing times.
Wonderful, thank you guys. All right, moving forward, Jeff, take us through some of the tools you can use to make this a little bit more streamlined.
Yeah, great question. And definitely, I think tech is here to help. So, we talked about Blueboard, definitely talking about 15.5. And in these times, again, it's important, OKRs or other frameworks that allow you and your team to focus your energy and effort on what makes the most sense right now to be focused on. And then also focusing on self-care as well. Might even be useful to slip in like a KR or even an objective right now at the company level around minutes on Headspace or something, right? Like something that shows you're caring about people. And then an underrated part of the book, Measure What Matters, is definitely conversations, feedback, and recognition. So making time for connection. In the chat, I saw something about how like right now it's impossible to over communicate. And I agree with that comment if by communicate you mean a two-way conversation. Like I think it's possible right now to over broadcast where it's just like constantly like just one directional. But it is really hard right now to over communicate where you have these deep empathetic conversations. And of course, you can do those things through Slack, through 15.5, but just asking each other questions and then making time to respond. And just even something in many platforms like a quick like or comment on someone's post or someone's share can show them, hey, someone is actually listening to me. And that's so, so important. Also, just generally the importance of one-on-one meetings. So any platform that helps you with one-on-ones is useful right now. So team member and manager can have that deep connection time around like just, hey, how are you? You know, what's going on with your most important priorities and agreements right now? What challenges are you having? Like, how can I help you? How can I support you? And just, again, that dialogue and real communication and conversation. Checking in, again, really important at the individual level, at the team level, and organizational level. At 15.5, we start meetings sometimes by talking about like, hey, what's your energy level? Or like, let's do a one-word check-in where it's like, let's just talk about how people are doing. And if you have 8 meetings in a row, sometimes you can say like by meeting 6, you're like, well, I've just, you know, now I'm tired because I've been saying how I am for 6 meetings in a row. But it is important to just check in. And check in can be as simple as, so I saw in the chat as well, people asking questions about like mental health and stress. It can be as simple as just saying like, how are you? And then genuinely listening to the answer. And then if someone shares that they're struggling, just saying something like, you know, it seems like, you know, based on what you shared that you're having a tough time, and then allowing them to elaborate and just being there for them. And then reminding them of like, oh yeah, you could talk to our people team about that. Or, oh yeah, we have these wellness resources. Maybe that's something you have to do down the road, but like it starts with just being there with them and being present with them with a real conversation. And that can be done again, like Slack, Zoom, so on, but then Teams, Facebook for work. But then as you move up the hierarchy, you want to do those things systematically. You want to make sure people have time for reflection. That's where some 15.5 things come in. And then also positive interventions, right? So things like gratitude practices. And we've been talking about appreciation and recognition. Like we don't want to lose track of these positive interventions and positive practices with just because there's stressful things going on, right? Like we want to make sure we're trying to live life above neutral and help others do the same. So not just like, oh yeah, removing the pain or removing the struggle, but also how can we help people thrive and not just survive in this circumstance.
All right, thank you so much. And then our next slide is, pass it over to Saloni, just that business leader perspective. How are these changes in productivity, changing in expectations affecting that broader business conversation that you're leading with your C-suite?
Sure. So I think transparency and reassurance was key for us here. We have shared information with the entire company about the state of our financial situation a few weeks ago at our company-wide all hands, and just reassuring employees that, you know, we happen to be one of the few that are very privileged and lucky to be in a place where we can work remotely. You know, we're not looking at mass layoffs. We have other levers that we can push and pull if the economic uncertainty continues and if we start experiencing that impact on our business. And, you know, I think just this continued transparent idea that like we know there'll be areas where people will have reduced motivation and reduced output and general overall stress. And we're accepting this as a part of our current tumultuous time. And we're relying on the power of communication and transparency to help us plan for this.
And I'll add to that, we're going through similar exercises. We want to have a best case scenario, but we also have to plan for, you know, if COVID continues, what does that look like? And very similarly, our founders were wonderful enough to have a very real, transparent conversation at our Q2 kickoff this week. Another tool that we found to be really helpful just for gathering those questions and getting that pulse of what's going on across the employees. We use a tool called Slido to do AMA or Ask Me Anythings. So we were able to run that for a few days before the meeting to give people an anonymous space to raise questions that might be a little scarier to ask in person. And then we were able to focus in on the top 5. You can upvote questions if you don't feel like contributing your own. And then that gave us a really great agenda of the questions that were most top of mind for our team whenever we had that large gathering as a group. So +1 that, Saloni, thank you so much for sharing. We have about 10 minutes left. Did anyone else want to add to that one before we move on? Sorry. Okay, great. So we have a few more questions that came through from the registration form. We'll get through these, and then as we have time at the end, we'll be able to take a few questions as well. And Michelle, the AMA tool is called Slido. It's just slido.com. Feel free to check it out, and it's a free version as well. So this next question comes from Jason. It's all about critical feedback. So how do we continue to have real candid conversations, or in times where you have to give critical feedback, how do you do that in our new world of virtual communication? Are there disciplines or behaviors that are different than before? And I'd love to have Marcella kick us off on this one.
Yeah, so when it comes to giving feedback, I think one of the biggest issues I'm hearing and seeing from our clients are things like, I know this person's so stressed out and busy, so I just feel bad about giving the feedback, or maybe this thing is happening with them, and then so there's a guess. One thing to consider, again, even pre-COVID, was the fact, or is the fact, that a lot of times people don't get the feedback that they need when they're working remote, simply because of just the fear of not giving the correct feedback, and of course the challenge of it being something that's written. So keep in mind, just psychologically, when you see written feedback, maybe it's an email, again, maybe it's an instant message coming from somewhere, our brains tend to process that as neutral or negative, as opposed to coming with good intentions. One of the first things that we can do, and this is also when thinking about transitioning back to work, is setting an understanding of why we're giving feedback. So talking to your teams, hey, it's going to be more important now than ever to make sure we can support each other and make sure that we are going in the right direction when it comes to how we're doing our work. So if I see something, I might say something. What's your preferred channel? Would you prefer to wait until our one-to-one and have a feedback conversation about it if it's something that can wait? Are you okay with me sending via email or via Slack message? Set the norm so people know it's coming. It's the expectation as opposed to being surprised. The other thing that can be really helpful for us is to be cautious or questionable about whether or not it actually matters. So your gut check and the gut check for your teams are, does this actually matter? Right now, when you have some teams who are in such high mode of like wanting to make sure everybody's doing the right thing, you might be getting feedback that actually is like irrelevant and not that helpful. Really check yourself. And if something does matter, ask yourself, what is my relationship like with this person? If they're already familiar with me, then sure, maybe sending it via email isn't the end of the world, but there's also a chance that that's not the case. Establish communication norms so we can support people, and also think about high frequency communication channels. So for example, via video chat is probably a lot more effective than via email. It just depends on the scenario, but always be assessing.
We're also getting more into the habit too, where if there's like a continuous flow of Slack, like if there's 10 or more messages, like let's just jump on video chat for 5 minutes, you know? It kind of brings the stress down. It gives the opportunity to collaborate a little bit more quickly, and then saves everybody time at the end of the day versus checking into that feed. So I think your comment of high frequency is definitely relevant in today's working conditions. So let's see. All right, next question is really all about reallocating resources, and I will kick this one off to start. This one comes from Adam. The question is kind of, as work needs to diminish, what's the best use of employees' time? Where do we direct their attention? Is it to training? Is it to culture development, self-care, etc.? So I love this question, Adam, because we're definitely facing this at Blueboard. As you can imagine, there's changes in our redemption rates. We are now seeing way more in-home redemptions, which is awesome. But when COVID first started, it was kind of a, what do we do with all of these out in the world experiences? So the teams that have had some slowdown or change, whether in sales and concierge and other parts of our world, we're finding really, really great internal opportunities to tap into skills development and carving out projects that they can lean into, maybe because they have future career aspirations and want to work cross-functionally with other teammates, or maybe there's specific OKRs, the objectives and key results that we can really focus people's attention around. We're also seeing a lot more OKRs this quarter related to process, infrastructure, operations, those things that are kind of saved sometimes for a rainy day, but are really great tools for building a foundation for our business. So one of the OKRs examples on my team is we're rolling out a project management tool. As my team and marketing has grown, there's a lot of different projects where we're collaborating, sometimes all 6 of us, and a lot of the times the due dates like fall to Slack and it's very disorganized. So we're taking this time to be a little bit more heads down and rolling out that project management tool as one of our OKRs, which is great because it'll give us a lot of like long-term yield in regards to streamlined communications. Another project that our team is running is bringing on more social media support. We're finding that a lot more people are spending time, especially on Instagram and other channels, as a way to find community when we're not in person. So we're bringing over 3 teammates who had a little bit of downtime but had aspirations to learn more about the marketing world. They'll be working closely with our digital marketing manager in kind of a 10%, a few hours a week capacity to support graphic design, social media monitoring, writing posts, which is awesome. So that'll be like a 2-month project or so as we kind of see how bandwidth changes. But we're really excited to have some of those projects surfacing, having more conversations with employees about the skills that they want to foster and really cultivate during this time when we have a little bit more downtime in some cases. Because alternatively, some teams are crazy busy and they can use the support, and it's kind of ebbing and flowing, sometimes even week to week. So great question, and wanted to see if anyone else on the panel wanted to contribute. Otherwise, we can move to our next question. All right.
Very quickly, I'll just say,
Oh, yeah.
Morgan, sorry to that
Sure.
question. Very quickly, I'll just say that this is such a unique thing for each employee, and that's only something that I think can really be determined by conversations. The last thing I'd say here is make sure you define them. We made a mistake early on at Life Labs. We're like, okay, everybody's all hands on deck, and all hands on deck put everybody into this frenzy of like, what the hell do I do to make sure that I'm secure in my job? And it's so overwhelming. So we had to define all hands on deck, meaning like, hey, here's a channel that you can go to if you're looking to start this project or you need some help with this particular thing, but really define it. I think that'll help a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to quickly just put our SHRM PDC on screen. It's 20NHMPN. There's a few other resources here. We're gonna cover one more question. We have another minute or 2 left. This one came from Vicky, and the question that a few of us have been asking on chat, so it's very relevant. Are some of us entertaining the idea of bringing more remote work into our office as we go into normal state? Some of us might be realizing that we work better remote, or there's a lot of great pieces of remote that we can carry forward. And if so, how are we kind of tackling that and thinking about our resources and infrastructure to react quickly if some companies choose to adopt remote going forward? Jeff will speak to this question, and we'll jump back over to this slide just so you can have the access to the code. Take it away, Jeff.
Yeah, I love this question. We're seeing a lot of this, and thanks to those of you who have to drop because we're at the top of the hour, but we're seeing a lot of our customers thinking about this, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, remote's actually working well for us, or like, what do we need an office for in the first place? Or could we downsize our space? So people are looking at their leases, of course. They're thinking about the trade-offs between people at home versus people in the office. One thing I want to talk about too in relation to some things I'm seeing in the chat is whenever people start going back into office, it's important to make time for decompression, transition, as well as learning during that period, right? Like we need to remember that whenever people come back into work, many people who have kids were like 2 or 3 full-time jobs, depending on how you calculate how much it takes to like teach a kid all day whenever they're at home. So like there's going to be this great feeling of relief for things to be going back to normal, and maybe some of the risks have diminished. However, there's going to be this exhaustion and potentially grief as people are moving back and things are changing so much. But as you're thinking about going remotely as an organization, definitely recommend making sure that you have the tools and tech stack in place to support that as well. Not just the basics of like, oh yeah, our people can communicate, but also how do they collaborate? How do we make sure that their work is seen? How do we make sure that they're receiving effective management and leadership as well? So thinking about that hierarchy of needs of like, are my people safe? Can they be connected and build relationships? And then can they be and become their best selves? Can they self-actualize in a remote work environment?
All right, thank you so much, Jeff. And I think that brings us to the end of our presentation today. We did have a few questions come through the Q&A, so we'll do our best to reach out to you directly after the event. Thanks to everyone who joined. We had over 1,000 people with us today, so I'm so happy that we were able to connect and build community. We have a lot of other great events coming up. You'll see on screen. Feel free to check out blueboard.com/resources for our next events, and stay in touch with 15.5. They're offering again their tool for free through June 15th for teams up to 50. So it's a great time to take advantage of that as well. Big thank you to Saloni, Marcella, Jeff, and for Mitchell for helping us run behind the scenes. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
Morgan. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.